featuring such classics as Lies, Inc., The Man in the High Castle, Ubik, Who Can Forget the Immortal, the man whose teeth were all exactly alike, and of course, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. Order now using this toll-free number. Not available in any store.
Hey, dickheads! Like a pink laser beam of truth beaming straight from our personal cold packs to your brain hole. I am David Agranoff, one of your personal dickheads. Larry might actually be in cold pack because we've only seen him once in the last year. We have a special guest dickhead joining us today, and by special I mean very special, author Stephen Graham Jones. Stephen, say hello to the folks.
Hey, yo.
Now, Stephen is the author of The Only Good Indians, which was my #1 read of the year last year, Night of the Mannequins, Mongrels. He also teaches literature at University of Colorado Boulder, correct?
Correct.
But if you want more, we're not going to go in depth with Stephen's work and what he's done, because I did an interview with him last year, and we'll put a link in the show notes to that interview. But Stephen, could you at least give the folks an introduction of how you got into Philip K. Dick?
I got into Philip K. Dick when I was 22. A friend I had met in a fiction workshop linked me initially to a Stanislaw Lem article on Dick. Not that one that you sent us, but a different one where he's talking about trash, and I don't know, it was really good, and that got me into it. And weirdly enough, the first PKD book I read was Valis, which is weird to like start that late in the game, you know. But yeah. Then I went back and ate everything else.
Right. And
everything? Have you read them all?
I don't know if I've read them all actually.
But you've
I've read like some. Yeah, I've read a lot. Like I've gone into the weeds a bit, like The World Jones Made and Counterclock World, all that little bitty books, you know.
Yeah.
I bet there's probably 8 I haven't read. I suspect, you know. Yeah.
Well, that's a higher level than what we started with when we started the podcast. So most of us had only read 3 or 4 novels, whatever. In case you're a new listener, and we do know people pop in for just individual books that they like, and Ubik has a lot of fans. I'm David Agranoff. I'm author of Goddamn Killing Machines and Punk Rock Ghost Story. I also do another podcast called Postcards from a Dying World, and I have a blog where I have over 1,000 book reviews, probably 1,200 book reviews at this point up there. And anywho, that's me. Anthony, tell the folks who you are.
Yeah, Anthony Trevino. I am a weird fiction writer and occasional cranky film critic on a bunch of blogs I'm sure no one reads at this point. But yeah, that's me.
Langhorne.
And I'm Langhorne J. Tweed.
And that's Larry. Langhorne, okay, thank you. So yes, our first segment is PKD News. 2 pieces of interesting news. One is that the PKD Award nominees for 2021 came out. So the nominees are Failed State by Christopher Brown, The Book of Koloy by M.R. Carey, which I'm reading next week, Dance on Saturday by Elwyn Cotman, Bone Silence by Alistair Reynolds, Road Out of Winter by Alison Stein, and I'm going to butcher this guy's name, but The Doors of Eden by Adrian Tchaikovsky, I think, something like that. He's a Russian writer. He wrote that Children of Time book that was, I'm told, very good. So those are the nominees. I don't have anything to say about those nominees. You guys got any comments? Or yeah, I didn't think so. All right. And we every year when they announce the judges, we put that information out there so people can nominate books. So the other piece of news is that the 30th anniversary 4K Blu-ray of Total Recall was released.
Really?
Yes, with multiple versions. There's the original DVD rip, there's the Blu-ray rip, and there's the 4K rip. Anyways, any thoughts on Total Recall getting a pretty new version?
I'll buy it.
Yeah.
I'll probably buy it.
Yeah.
I'll probably borrow it from you at some point.
Exactly. I think it's great to see Total Recall get respect still. Of course, we did an episode on Total Recall. We loved it. And it's one of those rare cases where it's better than the source material.
That was one of our first episodes. I think that was our 4th episode.
Yeah.
It's a while back.
Going way back. But yeah, so I'm excited. Total Recall, 30th anniversary. Where has the time gone? But anywho, let's get into this book. So Ubik.
Yeah, we can talk about that for a second. Just right off the top is tell them about that quote, David.
So there's a very famous interview that Pkd did with Pacifica Radio where he did address the pronunciation of Ubik, and it is, I believe, technically Ubik. And Anthony, you want to read the quote?
Ubik. The French call it Ubik. Dix Ubik. It's called Ubik, mia signore, in Italian. I guess that means Ubik, my dear sir, or something like that. Well, it does. I looked it up. Dick looked it up. I didn't look it up.
Yeah. So, yes, he was totally fine with it being Ubik, but I think he did call it Ubik. He joked around a lot about it.
And it is ubiquity. It's not ubiquity. So
exactly. So
right. So for the purposes of the episode, Ubik.
Yes.
And I'm sure our one infamous troll will show up to tell us we're wrong about it.
Yeah. Frank's already disliked this episode on YouTube. All right. So, but this book was published in 1969. 1969.
David, what was happening in 1969?
Well, that's the thing. There was a lot of famous things that happened in 1969. I think it's pretty in everyone's consciousness that the moon landing happened in 1969. Yeah. So it's really weird to think about this novel coming out.
Allegedly.
Yeah. Right.
Oh, no. Great. Thanks for bringing all the flat earthers to the podcast, to the YouTube comments.
So the moon landing obviously happened in 69. It was the last Beatles show happened in 1969. And the Stonewall riots happened in 1969. So just, wow. It was a big and important year. A lot of transitional things going on. Obviously, Vietnam was still a big deal at that time. But to me, the main things that just really anchored me to the time when I thought about this book was the moon landing and the Stonewall riots.
Well, so if Nixon was elected in 68, he started his presidency then in 69 as well.
Yep. First year Nixon.
And that that's also, didn't Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid come out in 69, and also The Wild Bunch, Sam Peckinpah? I think those both came out in 69.
If not, they were definitely around that time. That was when the beginning of that big push in independent films.
Yeah.
Yeah, both Butch Cassidy and Wild Bunch both came out in 1969.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And
also, Night of the Living Dead was playing at all the midnight movies until like 72, or they say it played forever. Yeah.
Yeah, that would have been awesome.
A great era for movies, that's for sure.
Now, for the writing and publication history of Ubik, we have a lot of information. And for longtime listeners, you will not be surprised that Pkd had a really bad title for this book before he changed it. Or Doubleday changed it, I'm not sure. Larry, you can get ready to add this to your spreadsheet of bad Pkd titles.
Oh, I got it. Yep.
Yeah. Are you ready, guys? The original title submitted was Death of the Anti-Watcher.
What?
Death of the Anti-Watcher.
Death of the Anti-Watcher.
I just want you guys to know, though, that I looked it up because I have the notes up, and before David said it, and he wrote it as D of the A to the W. And that sounds even worse.
The reason I wrote that is I didn't want to give away the title before I told you guys. When you looked at
I still think Earth's diurnal core rotation was the worst one.
which was for Dr. Blood Money, of course. Yeah. I don't know. There's so many bad ones, but yeah, Earth's diurnal course might be. And the worst part about that title is he tried to use it twice.
Yeah, right.
Which is,
But this one's pretty bad.
Yeah.
I'm trying to make it make sense in the context of the book, but
yeah. So yeah.
What did he publish just before this and just after? Do y'all know offhand? I don't know.
Oh yeah, David knows all that stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
We will be getting to all that. But first, we should mention that this, of course, Ubik, like many of Pkd's novels, are built on the spine of a previously existing short story, the first chapter of which is almost word for word out of a short story called What the Dead Men Say that was written in 1963. Phil has said in a couple interviews that when he sat down to write Ubik, unlike any other some of the other ones, he really didn't know what he was going to write. He didn't have an idea. He just took some of the setup of What the Dead Men Say and kind of built from there. And of course, we can all see that it started as one novel and became another one because he obviously halfway through went, oh wait, now I know what I want to write. All right, and it was written directly after Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep and before Nick in the Gilmung, his one children's sci-fi book. Here's an interesting thing about Ubik is that it was sold initially as a science fiction book club selection, which at the time is a very prestigious thing to have happen for a science fiction writer. So, and I want to give credit to that Pacifica interview, by the way, was with the DJ that interviewed him was Mike Hodal. And I did listen to part of that interview. Our friends at SFF Audio Podcast, Jesse, their episode of Ubik that they did maybe 5 years ago, long time ago. At the end of the episode, they sample for the last 12 minutes of the file on the podcast is this interview. So you can hear it through there. I tried to find it in other sources and I couldn't find it. So, but somehow Jesse found it, so it's there. And I recommend their discussion on it. It's very good. Jesse, other friends of the show, Marissa, Van Uden, and it's a good discussion. So, anywho, but we do have some Pkd quotes. We've got a lot of quotes. In fact, I don't think we can probably do them all, but he was very talkative in this Pacifica interview specifically about Ubik.
All I know today that I didn't know when I wrote Ubik is that Ubik isn't fiction. Ubik was primarily a dream, or series of dreams. In my opinion, it contains strong themes of pre-Socratic philosophical views of the world unfamiliar to me when I wrote it.
So, and I'm interested to get you guys' thoughts on this, too, is this idea that you may not know whether you're alive or not, or you've got this kind of thing going on. And it's funny to me because when I was reading it before I saw these quotes, it was really, I would not have imagined this was one of the books that he took very personally. I don't know what you guys think about this quote that he saw it as a series of dreams. Did anybody get that vibe when you're reading it?
I didn't. I always feel like when Philip K. Dick is talking about his stuff that he's like, I don't know what the word is for this. He's like post-intellectualizing it, if that makes sense, And I never quite buy the stuff he says about his books. I'd rather just read the books without him talking about such stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, we got a few more quotes.
I think sometimes I often wonder if Dick isn't entirely sure of why he wrote what he wrote. So when asked to explain it, he kind of skirts around the subject by saying, oh, it was a dream, or, oh, it's not really fiction. And then he walks away and you're like, the fuck this guy just say to me?
I know. Yeah, or he starts talking about Gnostic and numerology and all that stuff. And I'm like, you're just blowing smoke, But I still love the
he pulls
work
the I Ching out of his pocket.
Yeah.
In this case, the themes of pre-Socratic philosophical views of the world. So, yeah. Pre-Socratic. Is there any Socrates here? I don't know. I think he's pulling that out of his butt. But there's a lot of really great stuff here, but I didn't see that. So the next one is very funny to me because we know that he was a prankster, that he made up some stuff just to be provocative and to just, and so I will definitely want to talk to Tessa about this at some point and see if she has any more insight into this. But this quote about this letter that he got from Moscow, Anthony, can you read that, Tess?
Yeah, I got this letter direct from Moscow, signed by some fairly important scientists who invited me to visit Russia so they could talk to me.
What on earth for, Hodel asked.
Well, it seems they had read Ubik and had already formulated theories that the afterlife was remarkably close to what I had theorized in that novel. They wanted me to come over so they could find out what I knew, and probably experiment on me to find out how I knew.
And he said, you didn't go. And then he said, I actually considered going for a while. I think this is just him playing around. Like, obviously, he's just making this up. Come on. There are no Russian scientists who are coming to Berkeley in the late 60s to be like, Mr. Dick, tell us about the afterlife,
Yeah.
Remember, he was highly into amphetamines at this point, too, so...
Right.
His memories might not have been too great.
So I don't think we need to read the whole rest of the quote, but he really goes on.
Already know.
Yeah. He talks about a black limousine, trench coats, and
yeah, it's some real Russian G-men showed up. I think he's just talking shit.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe it was Jesse Ventura and Alex Trebek from the Jose Chung X-Files episode.
Yeah, right.
A man can dream.
He really does. I do think that the stream of consciousness thing that he was writing under, that he was going, I think he went back and added the Ubik ads to the beginning of the book. I'm guessing they weren't there when he started writing it.
Yeah.
And went back and added those. And
hilarious, by the way.
Yeah, because this first part of the novel is very clearly like it's almost Inception, right? Right? Mm-hmm. And it would have been a great novel on its own. If he had done a whole novel about anti-psychic espionage and corporate espionage and done a whole thing on that,
it would have been great.
It would have been great. I would want like a solar lottery tone, right? To that. And I think that would have been a great novel. But it's clear once he gets into it, he's like, he has this other idea for the Half-Life stuff. And we'll get more into that after our story breakdown. Larry, I think it's time.
For what?
Well, the story breakdown.
Wow.
Yeah, we're out of practice.
We
haven't done that once. Jesus, that was terrible.
I think the real like metal breakdown jokes really only work when we're in the room together.
Yeah,
I
think that's.
I gotta feed off David's mosh energy in real life, in real meat space.
We might have to actually make a drop for story breakdown.
Yeah, some sick riffs. Yeah,
sick riffs, brah. All right, story breakdown. Larry, tell us what happened in Ubik.
I have been told that I don't understand the books because these breakdowns are too juvenile. So I guess some people just, I guess I've found the Germans in the room, as they say.
Well, I was going to tell David, don't tell people we're scholarly, because
this is definitely not scholarly.
Because this is definitely not the podcast for that.
All right. So here's my book report. So we start with the dude in his office, and he finds out that there's people disappearing. There's psychics disappearing all over the place, and it's been happening more and more. And a super powerful one just disappeared, And he's like, oh, man, this sucks. I don't know what's going on. I got to go talk to my dead wife. So he goes and talks to his dead wife. And she's like, oh, I think you should do a thing. And then he says, all right, I'll do that thing. And then she starts talking in a different voice. And he's like, what the hell's going on? And then she turns into this kid, Jory. And Herbert Schoenheit von Vogelsang says, oh, that happens all the time. It's no big deal. And our guy, Glenn Runsiter, says, yeah, no, it's a big deal. So then that happens. So then we go to Joe Chip's house, where he wakes up hungover, broken, just a mess.
And no money to get out the door.
He meets up with Gigi Ashwood and this hot girl, Pat Conley, who has a super secret power that she can visit sort of the past and change the past, or change the present through the past, but she doesn't actually go into the past. It's a psychic journey into the past, but things do actually change. So that's her power. She uses it a couple of times, but not really. And, that whole thing about the psychics disappearing, yeah, forget about that too, because that really doesn't matter either. So they find out that there's a job that they can do. Our guy, Glenn Runsiter, is like, oh, he's feeling bad about everything. His wife is kind of disappearing from life. He says, oh, this woman comes and says, hey, I got a job for you. He's like, bang, big job. We'll be back on our feet. We'll show that, what's his name? Who's the enemy?
Hollis?
Yeah, Hollis.
Yeah.
We'll show that Hollis who's boss. And so they go to the moon with a bunch of people. It's Joe, Pat, and a bunch of other people. Then there's an explosion unexpectedly, and everyone dies. The end. Oh, no, wait. That's not the end.
Oh, no.
So what happens is there's an explosion, and Runsiter dies. And all the people are freaking out. They try to save his life. They go back to the ship. They don't get stopped. Even though they were attacked, they don't get stopped. So they're like, oh, man, what's going on? And so they go back. They try to revive him. And the dude, again, from Beloved Brethren Moratorium, is like, oh, we couldn't do it. It sucked. We tried, and we're still trying. So our main character, maybe our protagonist, says... This Joe Chip says, all right, we got to figure out what's going on, but I can't deal with it right now. And his buddy says, you should get a hotel and hang out and maybe get laid from that girl you like. And he's like, well, that's sort of a bad idea, but I'm for it. So then he goes and he ends up, all the stress makes him pass out. He wakes up in the morning, no girl, answers the phone. It's the dead Runsiter talking to him, or at least talking, and not necessarily to him, but he is saying some relevant stuff. And then the moratorium guy shows up again, and he's like, oh, I was sent here by so-and-so to do a thing with you, and I shouldn't give you money, and maybe there's a dead person in the closet, so you should look in there. So he does look in the closet, and lo and behold, there's a dead person in there. And then, so he doesn't know what's going on. He goes back to New York with his buddy Al. Is it Al? Yeah, Al Hammond. And then Al's like, oh, I'm not feeling well. Goes into the bathroom. And then he dies and turns into a little baby skeleton. And then he goes into the conference room where everybody is supposed to be, but they're not there. And he watches a little movie that turns out to be a commercial for Ubik, starring the one and only Glenn Runsiter. Runsiter keeps showing up. He shows up on money. He shows up in little notes that he's written in his handwriting. So our boy is very confused about what's happening. So he also finds out that Runsiter's funeral is happening in Des Moines, Iowa, because, that's the center of the heartbeat of the nation right there in Des Moines. So
Shut up, Des Moines.
He tries to find a way to get to Des Moines, and time is all fluctuating, going crazy, steadily backwards, but not consistently backwards. So it goes in like chunks. Boom, all of a sudden it's in the 50s. Boom, all of a sudden he's in 1939. And he has to get a plane, and he gets a rickety old plane from this guy or who flies him out to Des Moines. He's in Des Moines. He meets up with everyone. He's like, hey, some people are dead. And so we're probably all going to die too unless we hang out together. And they're all like, oh, that's a great idea. And then a couple of people don't hang out with them and they die. And then he's kind of going, oh, I think this is all Pat's fault. So he tries to blame Pat, and she thinks it's her too because she's, I think, insane. I think she's a little bit psychotic.
A little bit, maybe.
And so she thinks she's doing it. He thinks she's doing it. We have our red snapper. And then we move on to, Joe is starting to experience the same coldness and the oldness and the fading out that every other person that has died so far has felt. He tries to climb the stairs with Pat mocking him the whole time. He gets up the stairs, and all this stuff is, it's the end. It's the end for Joe Chip. It's the end of everything. And he still is so confused that he gets into this room to die, and there sits Runciter. And he's like, hey, you're not going to die. I have Ubik. And he sprays him with this can of Ubik, and all of a sudden Joe feels better. And Runciter explains that it's not he didn't die, it's all of them that died in this explosion on the moon. And he says, you know what? I've been trying to get through to you, and this is the first time I've been able to actually get through in person to speak to anyone here. So there's some stuff going on. He thinks he tries to make it like he knows what's going on, but Joe figures out he doesn't know what's going on, and there's other players involved. Turns out this is a battle between good and evil within our people that are stuck in the half-life, frozen half-life bowl. And the bad guy turns out to be that teenager from the beginning. And the good guy turns out to be Ella, which we kind of knew it was going to be Runciter's wife. Well, at least I did. I mean, there wasn't anybody else left for it to be. So we find out who's good and who's evil. Joe gets some more Ubik and keeps hanging out, and then trying to figure out how to get rid of this Jory kid. Figures out he can't get rid of this Jory kid. Ella says, you're not going to get rid of this Jory kid, but you're going to take my place and be Runciter's, go-to advice guy for as long as you're dead, or as long as you're only half dead, only sort of dead. And he says, all right, that's kind of sucky, but cool. And then it ends.
Mm-hmm. That's Ubik. All right. So there's a lot of essays out there on Ubik. There's a lot of writing. Ken Stanley Robinson devotes a lot of time in his book on the novels of Philip K. Dick to Ubik. So I will have some quotes from that. Specifically, one that I want to kind of start the discussion with is there's this essay by Peter Fitting, who I'm not familiar with, but it's one that Ken Stanley Robinson quotes a lot, from this essay called The Deconstruction of Bourgeois Science Fiction, where he basically...
Oh boy, sounds like a joy to read.
But what he's arguing is that PKD with this book is refusing that he's using a plot knot to make sure that this story never really fully explains itself, and that it's confusing on purpose. And I'm wondering how, and maybe we'll start with Stephen, Like, how do you feel about the idea that Ubik was meant or written to be confusing? How did you feel about this idea that he's refusing to give any logical solutions in this book?
I guess him saying that reminds me of what I've heard about Heidegger, that he would write a little treatise or an essay or whatever, a philosophical thing, and he had a little coterie of friends that he would circulate it among, and he'd go meet him, and they'd say, I understand this, and he'd say, well, I got to redo it. He'd rewrite it until it became more and more obscure. Nobody can understand it. I don't feel like that's actually what PKD is doing. I feel like he's just following his instincts and kind of, expressing his paranoia, if that makes sense. But for me, Ubik does make sense. I don't think it is a confounding knot or a Gordian knot for Adrian Veidt to cut through or anything like that. I think that the same way that I think the novel builds its own key for how to understand it. I think that we're led to believe that Hollis is the antagonist, and Hollis is never actually on screen or on page, I don't think.
Except for once.
Is he?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
He goes up and he talks to Joe once.
Okay. But he's made to be the big bad guy, but he's not really there, and it turns out that Jory is the real bad guy. And I think if we apply that same dynamic, like if we magnify it and make it bigger, then we can understand that Jory is also a false front, and there's something behind Jory. And I feel like that last little bit where Ubik comes in and says, I am Ubik, I feel like Ubik is right there being it's like Puck coming in at the end of Midsummer's Night Dream, to comment on things. And I think Ubik is actually the one maintaining this whole reality we live in as far as this novel is concerned. And it's like we were talking about Supernatural earlier. The way that Chuck in Supernatural is, he's just like playing games with people. I feel like that's what Ubik is doing, and it's inserting these little spray cans that people can feel like they are protected and they're getting ahead. But I think what Philip K. Dick is actually trying to smuggle across to us is the sense of distrust we should have about any kind of divine presence, and so to me it makes sense, if you read it like that. But I mean, that one dude, whoever you were talking about, David, is right that there are multiple reads of this. You can probably, this book it's kind of like Joyce Carol Oates' Where Are You Going, Where Have You Been? It's got a lot of parallel reads that they're not mutually exclusive. You can read it like this, like this, like this, like this, and any story or novel that has those parallel, non-mutually exclusive reads tends to have long legs, and Ubik has had very long legs as far as PKD's catalog is concerned,
Right.
Yeah, your frame of mind matters. I mean, how you read it, when you read it, how old you are, what is your wisdom level. I know I read it totally different when I was in my early 20s. That was
yeah, and this is probably my fourth or fifth time to read this novel, and like and Larry, you were saying that we all knew that Ella was gonna be the surprise force of good, and this is like my fifth time through this book, and I was still surprised by it. I can't figure it out. I mean, little dramatic things he does. Like you also mentioned the red herring that Pat is. She's a wonderful red herring. She makes us completely convinced that this group of Prudence people are stuck in like a Langolier's past that she has created. She's taken them back to a branching node, and it's decaying around them. But because we're all focused on that, we don't allow the possibility that they're in cold pack, that they're in a half-life. And I think it's dramatically, this book is really, really crafty. It really misleads us, or it takes advantage of our expectations once we know we're reading science fiction anyways.
Well, one thing that's interesting is I think, I read it one time, long time ago, so this is my second time reading Ubik, and I don't think I got it as much when I read it. I was too young. I wasn't ready. But I also think that reading it after having read, now that we're reading his entire, oeuvre in order, I think if I had read Ubik on its own without having read the entire catalog up to it, it would have been more powerful of a book. But because he's done this private cosmos,
Eye in the Sky,
Wait for Last Year,
Yeah.
Martian Time Slip, Three Stigmata. They're all kind of private.
Time Out of Joint.
Time Out of Joint, yeah. So he's played with these ideas before, and I think that if you're just a reader who maybe saw it on the list of Time's 100 best English language novels, and you haven't read everything that he's done, it's going to be way more mind-blowing. Anthony, did you?
Well, what's interesting here, too, is that he's also drawing from the antagonist from the Cosmic Puppets, which, as everyone knows, we all unanimously disliked, of a kind of like a shitty kid who's never had a chance to like grow up and live, so he's manipulating all these other people as an outlet for his own personal rage, which I thought was kind of interesting because we haven't seen Dick do that since the Cosmic Puppets.
Yeah,
Maybe a little bit.
I would have liked to have known Jory a little more as a character. That would have been nice to have more motivation behind just sheer survival.
Well, he's a stock villain. I mean, if you want to call him a villain, so to speak, he's a pretty one-dimensional character. But interesting nonetheless.
But he's also a function of nature. Like they say that in all these Tiltec units, these Half-Life facilities, there always rises a Jory, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like once the dreams merge, or not the dreams, the Half-Lives merge. I'm thinking of dream vortexes from Sandman, I guess, which is very similar to these dreams merging. But once the Half-Lives merge, that there does always arise a Jory, and the Jory is hungry, I guess, So, yeah, Jory is for sure the antagonist. I don't know if I'd call him evil. Finally, I think he's like a leopard. A leopard's going to eat you if you're around,
Yeah.
All right.
What is it? The scorpion and the frog?
Yeah.
Before we get back to some overall thoughts, I want to dig deep on some of the different themes that are in here. And the first one I want to go to is I want to talk about the anti-psi prudence organizations. I want to talk about that aspect of it because we all agree that you could have built a whole novel out of that. And for example, if you were to do, and really, like, it's impossible not to think of Inception when you're reading this, the Christopher Nolan movie. Because
I didn't think of it once. So.
I didn't think of it at all.
Oh, really? Because
Vanilla Sky. I thought of that though, man.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't think of it, but
I thought a lot of Eye in the Sky.
I can see thinking of both.
Because he's using a lot of the same tricks he used in Eye in the Sky for this book.
And also, he's kind of cutting. He's doing the book in two pieces, like Radio Free Albemuth too, a little bit,
So, but what's going on with the anti-psi thing is similar to Inception, because with Inception you have the corporate spies that are stealing dreams, right? And so it's the corporate espionage aspect of it. And if you were to build a whole novel off of it, it'd kind of be similar to that. And if you
but it's kind of like Vulcan's hammer in that sense. In that it's a computer doing it, an AI, but it's the sort of the same story, isn't it? With whether it's psychics or whether it's a computer, it's this corporate espionage with science fiction elements. So.
All right, so the first scene that I wanted to kind of pull out from about the prudence organizations, which anybody have any comment on that they're called prudence organizations? Because I like it.
I like it. It's really on the nose.
Yeah, it's very funny. But we get all of the PKD. All of the terms are in this one. The conapts, the homeopapes, but right here when we talk about the prudence organizations. Telepaths and precogs mostly. They're nowhere on Earth. I know that. They've got a dozen inactive inertials, so the inertials are the ones that are anti-psychics, with nothing to do because the psis they've been nullifying aren't around. And what worries me a lot more, is that requests for anti-psis have dropped, which you would expect given the fact that there are so many psis missing. I love the idea that they've done such a good job getting rid of the psychics and telepaths.
So is that ever explained? Did I miss something? Where are all these psychics?
Well, I think what he's trying to imply is that there used to be a real big problem with psychics and precogs and telepaths, and they were all kind of running amok. And they created these prudence organizations, these anti-psi organizations, to clean up the mess. And now they're all on other colony worlds, or they're all out in the frontier.
Well, they said they don't exist anywhere.
Well, they do. I think they exist on the frontier. And this gets back to that whole thing that Evan
No,
Lamb...
he specifically says they don't exist.
He
They
says
sent them all to psychic jail, Larry. I don't know.
Right. Okay. So
Okay, so it's not me. It is something that's kind of
It's a
kind of
little vague.
left
it's a
vague.
little vague. Yeah.
Yeah.
I got the impression that they had moved out to the frontier. And you know when like our friend of the podcast Evan Lampy, like he talks so much about PKD and the frontier, and we get less of direct mentions. There's not as many direct mentions to the frontier in Ubik, but I think this idea that we know that there is more colonies and stuff out there because they went to the moon pretty easily. We're just going to go to Luna, you know, and then so we know that there is.
Well, they don't have hyperdrive or whatever it is yet.
Yeah, because
Just working on that.
they're just working on that. Yeah, and I like the idea that they have that they specialize in different kinds of talents. So like Pat's the one who can kind of move in and out of time, right? And so I like this idea that there's different talents and psychics, and that's where I think you could have built a whole novel out of it. But he does use it very well here for the red snapper, and shout out to Perfect Getaway. But they do. I think the idea that they have the psychics are out there is kind of funny, and it's just kind of given. But that's just a PKD thing. But as far as the Prudence organizations goes, there's also the idea that they're exterminators, right? And there's a line I like when they get to the moon and Stanton Mick is giving them their mission, right? And he says, "Hello, all you top anti-Psis." And then he says, "The exterminators are here," and by that I mean yourselves, right? The plague in the form of various psionic riffraff descended upon the harmless, friendly, peaceful world of Stanton Mick. What a day it was for us in Mickville, as we call our attractive and appetizing lunar settlement here. So that's where the psychics, that's where they are. They're all up on the moon fucking with Mick Stanton. So, you know, they get hired to come to these places and clean things up. So I loved that scene. That scene cracked me up. I thought that was one of the really funny parts. Do you guys have any other comments about the whole Prudence organization and the anti-Psi thing? That's what I have.
You know, I didn't. They are called exterminators. I guess the way I read the novel, if I read the novel as some kind of divine entity playing games with us, then it makes sense that that divine entity would allow these people to feel like protagonists by removing Psis from the story, you know? So it's just like any excuse will do to get these other people out of the way such that you guys can have the spotlight, you know? Because we all want to feel like we're in the spotlight when we're either characters in our own stories or we're reading. I mean, I don't know. To me, it makes sense, you know? But yeah, I can see where people would see it. They would call it like a narrative stub or something, you know? That we don't know where. I mean, possibly they're on Luna. Possibly that's a lure a bait to get them there. You know, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm kind of bummed we didn't get this PKD novel about the anti-Psis like more directly. You know, I kind of wish we got that because I think that would have been pretty good.
All right, David. So here's what it says. We asked Joe Chip to go in there and run tests on the magnitude and minitude of the field, blah, blah, blah. The technician finished. So that's where we stuck Melipone's ident flag on the map. And now it is gone. Did you look on the floor behind the map? It's gone electronically. The man it represents is no longer on Earth, or as far as we can make out, on a colony world either. So they basically all disappeared out of existence.
Okay, the Blade Runners hunted them down.
Yeah. You would think they would know if they got killed, then they would still.
Yeah, totally. All right, so the next, unless you guys got anything else in the Prudence organization, I'm going to move on to Private Cosmos and go more deep on that. because this is my favorite. This is one of my favorite PKD themes, and I actually think that each time he gets into it, he does like a better job of exploring it. We all know, you guys all know that I love Eye in the Sky. Eye in the Sky is one of my favorite of the 50s. Let me give you this quote from Kim Stanley Robinson from his book. He says, Martian Time Slip 3 Stigmata, Now Wait for Last Year, and Ubik are good examples of the private cosmos time travel. Adrift in time as a result of drugs or madness or both, the protagonists of these 4 novels learn to regard a return to the past as a horrifying regression into a dead, immutable world. And one of the things that I really liked about how he kind of is priming the reader for this is coming was the introduction that everybody just kind of has the Tibetan Book of the Dead in this future, that the Tibetan Book of the Dead is like this.
It's like Dianetics in the 80s.
Right. Exactly. And I thought, let's see, that was on page 12. And Ella introduces it by saying, I was dreaming. I saw a smoky red light, a horrible light. And then Runster says, yeah, the Bardo Tibetan Book of the Dead tells about that. You remember reading that. The doctors made you read it when you were, and then he hesitated, dying, he said. So the smoky red light, I really love the imagery of that's like, don't go fully to that red light because that's going to end your half-life, but the Tibetan book...
No, it's a bad rebirth. It's not just ending your half-life.
Yeah, you're going to be born again. And so...
Poorly.
Yeah.
That's the point. It's not, you're just going to be born again. You're going to be born again poorly.
Yeah, exactly. And then... But I love that people read the Tibetan Book of the Dead to get ready to go with Vogelsong and be this half-life, which he doesn't really go too much into it, but it seems like the half-life thing is definitely a bourgeois, like a rich person thing.
Yeah.
And she gets to do it because she's this kind of...
Rich.
She's rich. She's got it. Anybody have any thoughts on this, how the half-life is introduced? I thought it was great.
Yeah, I was really impressed with it. I thought that the reason that Ella ambushes me as being actually important to the story is that I thought she was just a way to dramatize this exposition about the half-life, So I thought she was going to be used and disposed of, and so I was really surprised when she came back,
Mm-hmm. And
I thought she was just going to be taken over by Jory, and that was it. That was the end of her.
Yeah, I remember getting halfway through the book and thinking back on those first couple chapters and thinking, God, it's kind of a way to, I guess, to get to know Runciter, but we seem to focus a lot on what's happening with her in the cold pack, and then it just kind of seemed like a not a useless chapter, but a weird chapter, but then it all kind of connects and comes.
Yeah, another dead end, another PKD dead end there, but it's totally not.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is the actual, like, kind of defining what Half-Life is doesn't take place till page 83 of the Mariner edition. When Eddie Dorn says it was a Swiss invention, and according to impartial surveys, the average length of half-life given an individual in the Swiss moratorium is 2 full hours greater than an individual in ours. The Swiss seem to have a special knack. And then Joe says the UN should abolish half-life, interfering with the natural process of cycle of birth and death. I thought that was really interesting that he didn't really actually say, like, oh, yeah, it's a Swiss invention here. To give the actual details until 83 pages in is pretty interesting, too.
Well, I think to Dick's credit, he didn't need to. Sorry, Stephen, go ahead.
No, yeah, I agree. I suspect, it'd be interesting to look at his original manuscript, but it feels kind of like a note from an editor who said, all right, there's going to be, 6 out of 13 readers out there who wonder what Half-Life is. Can you please give us a little info dump about what that is,
Right.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah. So one of the cool things about how he reveals the fact that they're in this half-life, right? Because they think they're taking Rensselaer to it. there's a couple things too, and it was funny because I just saw the other day on Facebook I saw a post where somebody said, "If I see Glenn Rensselaer on a quarter, I'm out of here." And I thought that was very funny because I think that the different subtle ways that he reveals that they're in Half-Life are so much better done than some of the earlier books where he did this. As much as I love Eye in the Sky, some of the reveals are clunky, but the time regression with the stale cigarettes, the food getting spoiled and bad.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that, David. I think that the effect of that for the reader, for the whole audience, really, is that it charges our world with more meaning. We now might get a pack of stale cigarettes and we'll hesitate for a minute and look around like, are we in the Matrix or what's going on? And I think when a book can do that for us, when it can change our world, or the way we interface with the world, I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. And he does this in a couple really interesting and subtle ways that I think just show a command of the story. And once he really starts playing with it for jokes, then, we're further in it. But I think the appearance of the coins, the money, and the subtle things are done so well. And that's one of the things that I just really love here.
And Rensselaer's face appearing on the currency and stuff, that's Stephen King in his recent collection of novellas, If It Bleeds, has a story called The Life of Chuck, I think, and he has that exact same dynamic going on where this guy Chuck, his face is on all the billboards and it's everywhere, and it's so cloying and claustrophobic and evocative. It's really a cool trick,
Yeah. And then of course there's a moment where he picks up the phone and he hears Glenn Rensselaer's voice. I like that he says, "My phone's broken." He's just hearing his voice like, "Yeah, my phone's broken. I got this thing." And but one of my favorites in that was Glenn writing in the bathroom. Obviously, is going to be one of those moments that everyone talks about in this book. I think the reveal of the jump in the urinal, stand on your head, I'm the one that's alive, and you're all dead, is a great reveal. As a writer, Stephen, what do you think about this as a reveal?
No, it was really an effective reveal. I agree. And the reason it was effective was because at that point in the story, I was 100% subscribed to the possibility that they were in Pat Conley's past rather than Half-Life, And so this sense that Glenn Rensselaer is speaking to Joe Chip through some medium that we can't quite, it's a very problematized medium. He might be speaking into a microphone, but it comes up as bathroom graffiti or however it's working, mechanically. I was really impressed with it, and not just with how it's staged, but where it comes in the story, because it like it just comes at a point where it pulls the rug out from under me that I thought was solid,
Mm-hmm. And also in the private cost, well, before I get to that, Anthony, what did you think of the reveal? Because I'm interested in your thoughts on how on whether this scene worked for you or not. Because
I think. Go ahead.
No, because you're the most skeptical of some of these kinds of reveals and moments, but.
I think in a lesser writer's hands, it would have been more obvious from the start. But Dick approaches this Dick's transitions are almost always seamless. When we move from reality to, I guess, what would you call irreality, unreality, a new reality? There's never a moment, I think. So in a less skilled writer's hands, I think you'd have a moment where somebody gets knocked out, they wake up, and now stuff is different. Whereas what Dick does is it just changes without ever letting you know. So when you look at the scene when Stanton Mick explodes, that's the moment that we transition from them being alive to them being in cold pack. But all you get is the bomb exploded and then them kind of escaping from that.
Well, there is a tell though.
Where?
Because he does that same transition before when Pat proves her her skill or her power.
Are you saying before or after?
before.
It's before, yeah, and that's the fact that we have seen that transition before. That's what led me to believe that the second transition was Pat also, which was a wonderful misdirect.
That's what I liked about it as well, is that mystery.
I guess I missed it.
Yeah, when she does the whole year where they get married, and all that stuff, it uses the same transition.
Wasn't she trying to get the job from him at that point? And was
Yeah.
Yeah. That was great. That was really, that was a really good.
Yeah, well, I assume that was what was going on, but I think what I'm more getting at is that from a craftsman level, that Dick never really tells you that it's changed. It's just
no, I know what you're saying. Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, no, he does. Dick does like narrative escalation without a ramp, and it's really cool because you just walk from one place to another and you don't feel the difference,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, then
it's a great way to go. It's who does that also is David Lynch in his movies. He doesn't feel the need to carry you along, and that's what Dick does as well. Is he just says, the story's moving forward, keep up.
Yeah.
Well, so next I want to, within the Private Cosmos arena, I want to talk about Chekhov's mutual osmosis between mental half-lifers, which is the intro to Jory. And I do think that what was great about that is that he does put it out there, and we should remember that Jory should be important, but we kind of forget about it. And I do think that that's one of the things that's good too, is because he does pepper within the story, because we've given Dick a lot of shit for not plotting well on this podcast.
No. You've given him shit for not plotting.
Oh no, I have as well.
Some of the more ambiguous stuff does work for me.
Right. But you've given him shit for not plotting well too. Come on. Go back and listen
Anthony trying to take the high ground.
Yeah, don't take the high ground.
For which one, David?
Go back.
No, I wasn't trying to take the high ground. I'm just saying, when Dick gets real surreal and vague, it's kind of my thing. I really enjoy that stuff. But.
Okay, but my point is that this book is probably his best plotted that I've read so far, in my opinion. In what's really cool about, and Jory is the example that I want to use on that, because when we look back to books like, especially as much as I liked like The World Jones Made, it's just like he's throwing out shit, like left and right, and he's just like, yeah, here it goes. And it's really easy to read Ubik and think he's just throwing shit out. And when he tells you, I was just kind of writing for a dream, I believe he did in the first draft, but I think this book got a serious second draft. Once he knew what the story was, and I think he went back and he, like, with the elements, with Jory, with Pat, he was so well setting up the trick. I cannot believe he just did that from the seat of his pants. I feel like that there was a serious second draft. And
other than the tonal difference between the prior to the explosion and after the explosion in the humor level and just the direction of the story, I think you're absolutely right that he must have spent way more time on this.
Yeah. Talking about his plotting, like Game of Death is really well plotted, I think. PKD can plot. I think he's not interested in like setting up dominoes and knocking them down. He's interested in giving the most quiet whispered clues here and then here and here. And if you hear those whispers right, then everything makes sense,
Now, what do you guys think? Now, Kim Stanley Robinson, I had this quote where he said, in Ubik, the nature of reality problem, or the reality breakdown, is the central experience of the narrative. Do you agree with that? Because I don't, actually.
Yeah, I don't think I do either. No.
Yeah.
No.
We're all going to disagree with Mr. Robinson here. I don't think it is. Because when I read that quote, I was like, no, because I think that there is a reality here. And all these people that spend all this time writing about Ubik and talking about how it's so crazy and it's so weird, it's like the experience that when you figure out what Mulholland Drive is about, for example, right? The first time
I've been trying to find a way to bring up Mulholland Drive.
Yeah.
Because it is very similar to this book in a lot of ways.
Right. When you first watch Mulholland Drive, yes, you sit there and go, what the fuck is this about? But as soon as you figure out what Mulholland Drive actually is, which is very similar story to Ubik, like you said, then you go back and watch it again, it makes perfect sense, and you feel like a freaking idiot for not getting it the first time.
Well, because both of these stories, Mulholland Drive and Ubik, seem super complicated. I think Stephen said this earlier. It's not super complicated, you know. It very much follows a track. If you can see the track, there's, you know, it's not that hard to understand. It's not that out there and crazy.
You just got what you got to do is just like Philip K. Dick is real good at waving his hand over here while he's doing something on the side over here. And if you can if you can turn off these people wearing Argyle socks with tutus and weird hats, if you can turn that off, then you can pay attention to what he's really doing, you know?
Yeah. So
that brings up a good point, though. The fashion sense, he doesn't really do a good job, in my opinion, of transitioning the fashion sense as the world changes.
Yeah,
so I was actually curious. Are they still wearing, you know, alligator trousers and stuff like that as they're going into the past?
Yeah, I feel like he dresses these people in Ubik the same way Back to the Future 2 dresses 2015 kids. Yeah. You know, if that makes just ridiculous. Right. But I think he's doing it either to signal to us that he's not writing about the future, he's writing about 1969, or he's putting people in these weird clothes as a way of making fun of all the other science fiction writers who are trying to actually guess what we're going to be doing in 30 years. Or whatever.
Yeah, well, he does it in other books too, and I feel like it is a joke to him. He's going off on this, riffing on this, this joke of his.
Yeah.
All right, so anything else on the private cosmos? Because that's the last thing I have on that. So
I do have a quote that I'd like, and this might be a good spot for it. I think this is my favorite quote in the book, and it's kind of at the beginning, and it's Pat. And it says, "It bothers me that people will feel hostile toward me, but I guess you can't live very long without arousing hostility. You can't please everybody, because people want different things. Please one, and you displease another." I feel like that's all very humanistic, and everyone can kind of relate to that. But it also is amplified when you have magic powers. Mm-hmm. You know,
well, when you have magic writing powers like he does, and you're a novelist, you have to kind of repeat that to yourself as a way of not listening to all the bad stuff people say about you.
Yeah, right.
You know?
You have writing powers that aren't recognized in your time. Yeah.
This is a fantastic quote. I thought it was a great line of dialogue, and just a great. It has a great meaning behind it.
It does. It's kind of him using that character as a sock puppet to say what he wants to say, which is great, you know.
And I love when he does that. He does that a lot. Well, maybe not a lot, but
I'm glad when
he do it more.
I'm glad when he uses his books to communicate his feelings,
his thoughts.
Yet not about his wives.
Yeah.
Anytime he does it about anything other than the ex-wives. Good.
But you do get he does give real insight into who he is and how he thinks in certain passages.
Yeah.
And you always know when he's going through a divorce. So
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, Clans of the Alphane Moon, for example. But
Divorce City.
Book. Yeah.
Great one.
Yeah, so the next theme I want to talk about is Ubik, the product. And the idea that Ubik is the product fighting entropy, and, you know, in doing this is really funny. But when I was reading through, going back, looking for quotes, the one that really made me laugh was on page 133, and this is my absolute favorite of the Ubik parts, when he turns on the TV and there's the face of Glenn Renster there, and he says, "Tired of lazy taste buds?" Renster said in his familiar gravelly voice, "Has boiled cabbage taken over your food? The same old stale, flat Monday morning odor, no matter how many dimes you put in your stove," which is great. Ubik changes all that. Ubik wakes up food flavor, puts hearty taste back in where it belongs, and restores that fine food smell. And then I'm going to skip a little bit. And then one invisible puff puff whisk of economically priced Ubik banishes the compulsive, oppressive fears that the entire world is turning into clotted milk. I thought when I read that, I almost fell out of my chair the first time. And then when I reread it, I laughed out loud again. This to me is one of the funniest things PKD's ever written. That really cracks me up. I can see it totally. And I think it so well speaks to the idea that Ubik is just, shake the can and fight entropy. Just that last line, like, banishes the compulsive, oppressive fears that the entire world is turning into clotted milk.
Yeah, you can pretty much replace Ubik with the ShamWow, and it's just the same,
Right, and of course, if anybody ever does make a Ubik movie, there's going to be hilarious infomercials that are a part of it. Mm-hmm. And if they were smart, and we usually talk about this later, but if they were smart, they would be doing viral videos to promote the movie for months ahead.
The marketing,
there'd be an insufferable Comic-Con ad campaign all over downtown. I'm sure.
Right.
There definitely would be.
Yeah.
And just the videos popping up everywhere with, make your oatmeal more Ubik-y,
Well, you know what my favorite part about the Ubik ads is the dark tone at the end of most of them. The warnings. Only if used as directed. Follow the rules. All that sort of. I mean, it's almost like a 1984 oppressiveness that he's adding to the end of all those ads.
Do it the right way, or your skin sloughs off.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not sure I have this part set aside, but I also love that there's a technobabble explanation.
I have that.
Oh, you do?
Yeah. From the end? From near the end?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to hear that?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. The negative ions are given a counterclockwise spin by a radically biased acceleration chamber, which creates a centripetal tendency to them so that they cohere rather than dissipate. A negative ion field diminishes the velocity of anti-protophasons normally present in the atmosphere. As soon as their velocity falls, they cease to be anti-protophasons and, under the principle of parity, no longer can unite with protophasons radiated from persons frozen in cold pack.
So I read that like I read all my old school science textbooks.
It's so funny. It's such bad science.
I love how it's followed up with, you don't have to say negatively charged ions. You can just say ions.
Ions are already negatively charged.
And so early on in this podcast, we would do a lot of the pseudoscience because there was more of it. He just kind of quit doing that for years. So for us to have
wackadoo, that's what we call it.
Yeah, we call it wackadoo.
It is wackadoo science, pseudoscience.
Just great. And it is page 137 and I love how there's a couple different scenes where somebody says, "What is Ubik?" And they don't really get an answer until 137. And that's where Runster and Ubik, ubiquity, he realized all at once that the deprivation of the made-up word, the name of Runster's alleged spray can product. So it's not really till 138 that it's even like...
Yeah, but Runster doesn't know what it is.
Yeah.
He doesn't, yeah. But that wackadoo science, back in probably 02 or 03, Octavia Butler, I brought her to my class to talk to my students, and for the whole class, her and I argued about whether Philip K. Dick was science fiction or not. And because of that wackadoo science, she said he's not. She was insistent that science fiction is an extension of existing technology.
So it has to include real science?
Yeah, real science, yeah. And of course, Philip K. Dick is not interested in that remotely, He likes to adopt the jargon to make fun of it, but he's not interested really. And I was
only when it comes to psychology does he anywhere near actual science, but
yeah.
Anything else,
Yeah.
he doesn't care.
Can I just say how incredibly jealous I am of your students in 2003 that I got to watch you and Octavia Butler argue whether Philip K. Dick is science fiction or not. That's amazing.
It was fun. Yeah.
What a moment to see. Well, yeah, the wackadoo science of it and the name. I mean, I guess I always knew reading it that Ubik kind of meant ubiquity, when like it's obvious from the ads, but I like that that it only gets spelled out this one time and it's only kind of said once. And it does kind of scream of editorial notes there too. I'm not sure who edited this novel, because we're at Doubleday here, not
Talking about the spray, the ubiquity, that gets sprayed on everything. I wonder, I didn't ever think about this, but I wonder if that's in dialogue with Ken Kesey's Harvester from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which is the idea that across society there's a harvester, or there's a flattening agent that comes and makes everything the same, and
Right.
it seems like spraying everything with ubiquity would make everything the same, so I wonder if they're in dialogue. I mean, I wonder if Dick was answering Ken Kesey, I don't know.
I would love to know that that's true. That would be amazing.
Yeah.
I would say for Stephen, the your theory on Ubik being the monster basically itself, I think page 162 of the Mariner edition is I think kind of gives credence to it. It's where they're talking about the Ubik dreams that they're having, and Joe says, we haven't gone anywhere. We're where we've always been, and for some reason, one of the several possible reasons reality has receded is it's lost its underlying support and it's ebbed back to its previous forms. It took 53 years ago. It may regress further, but on the next page, he starts talking about it being the aerosol can, and down on that lower on the page, he says, it wasn't like any dream I've ever had before. A great hand came down from the sky like the arm in the hand of God, an enormous size of a mountain. And I knew how important at the time it was. The hand was closed, and then the hand has the spray can, and I think that adds credence to your theory, that page.
Yeah. That's cool. That's good.
It also, again, reminds me of Cosmic Puppets. There's a couple of things in this book that really bring back Cosmic Puppets in a strong way, and not in a bad way.
Yeah,
in a better way.
Yeah. He's improved on the ideas,
but he does have that element of good versus evil that he has in Cosmic Puppets in here. That, and like Anthony said about the Jory being basically an
kid
analog
villain.
for same kid.
So I have a couple quotes from the next thing that I have is the next kind of theme that I wanted to talk about is the story consistent? And I think we all kind of already stated that we think it is consistent, but a lot of...
Now, are we talking about plot holes or something like that?
Yeah, is the story of Ubik consistent? And a lot of the Kim Stanley Robinson and Stanislaw Lem quotes are about the book being so crazy or doesn't make sense or, and so I have this quote from Kim Stanley Robinson where he's talking about Lem's essay on it, the one that I sent you guys. He's talking about consistency. He was not willing to grant consistency in the case of Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep because he could construct no single explanation that would resolve the inconsistencies in the treatment of the androids. But with Ubik, he is able to first construct an explanation he found satisfactory. So Lem argues that it was consistent, right? And then to bypass the matter, that he's just bypassing explanations altogether. Like Stephen said, it doesn't matter if you get it or not, we're going, story's going. So Lem's saying that. And then Kim Stanley Robinson says, we're not only forced, but we ought to, at a certain point, leave off defending its science fictional nature, the impossibility of imposing consistency on a text, to seek its global meanings not in the realm of events themselves, but in that of their constructive principle, the very thing is responsible for the lack of focus. He's basically saying, like, it's okay, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if the story doesn't make sense, it's almost like Dick is writing realism, because the world doesn't make sense either. You know, it does conform to rules that we think we understand, but we don't know why things happen. You know, it doesn't make sense.
But there's no need for rules here. It's a false reality. So, you know, you can abandon that as well.
Oh man, I broke this ball I've been playing with. You ever seen one of these fall apart? Whoa. Yeah, this is a huge mess. It's in my keyboard now too.
What is it, like rubber bands or?
Well, it's like one of those balls that are just a lot of strings that kind of meet at the center. I don't know what they're like, squish balls or something.
Squish ball or
yeah, I think that's it. Yeah.
Dickhead's history right here. Koosh ball is destroyed. We have another quote from Ken Stanley Robinson, and I'm sorry, but I read a lot of his book on this. The clearest example of Dick's plan of embedding inconsistency into the structure of the text, every reader of Ubik becomes engaged, just like its characters, in the struggle to create a coherent explanation for the events of the narrative. Like the characters, every reader is eventually defeated. The persistence with which the readers have attempted to succeed in creating an explanation is a tribute both to the fascination exerted by this particular sequence of events and to the strength of the generic expectations we bring to our reading. To accept defeat in explaining Ubik is to participate in the evolution of science fiction. Robinson.
Or, I mean, that's just, like I was saying, that's life too. We spend our whole life trying to figure out the meaning, and we never do. We just have to find a station and get off and be happy with where we are, you know?
Yeah, as William Hurt says in The Big Chill, sometimes you just have to let art flow over you.
Yeah.
Whoa, how you know? All right, and I do have a quote from Tessa. Many readers have puzzled over the ending of Ubik. When Glenn Rensselaer finds a Joe Chip coin in his pocket, what does it mean? Is Rensselaer dead? Are Joe Chip and the others alive? Actually, this is meant to tell you we can't be sure of anything in the world that we call reality. It is possible that they are all dead in Cold Pack, or that the half-life world can affect the full-life world. It's also possible that they are all alive and dreaming, said Tessa. So
sure, why not?
Yeah, or we're all in Descartes' like demons simulation, you know? I think.
Yeah. Okay, and so the last,
or we're all in Sartre's No Exit. Who knows?
Yeah.
So the last subject that I want to talk about is the Pkd isms. So we've got our precogs, we've got the anti-size, we've got conapts. I don't think they're peak conapts like The Man Who Japed, but they're pretty good here. When the conapts have stimulant and gossip settings, like you know,
like the papes, the homeopapes.
Yeah, Twitter versions of homeopapes that you can utilize. A door threatens a lawsuit against Joe Chip, which is great.
The door is one of my favorite characters of this book. The door is fucking great.
It's the opposite of Douglas Adams' door in Hitchhiker. You know, the one that's cheery all the time.
Yeah.
He also says ersatz. He loves saying ersatz.
Ersatz, yeah.
And then, but the greatest Pkd invention of this book, the self-destructive humanoid bomb.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And
also like the amphetamines in the vending machine. That's kind of nice, you know?
I know. I dream of that world.
I know.
That would be very convenient for my lifestyle. So, yes.
Yeah, you need a little pick-me-up. You just go to the vending machine.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And they also have them for hallucinogens.
I know.
Come on, man. Now you're just teasing me.
My favorite thing, though, about the self-destructive humanoid bomb is it's kind of mentioned like, of course it is.
Yeah.
But he
Yeah.
plays it so straight. That's what makes it, for me, if the author plays it straight, I believe it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, was there any other PKD-isms that we've missed? I think we got them all, but
Were there any artiforgs in this? Any artificial
Yes.
organs?
Yes.
yes,
Right at the beginning.
yeah.
I kept thinking Joe Chip should put a string on his nickel to get out the door and just get his nickel back every time. Like we used to do when we were kids.
Maybe that wasn't known until video games where you did it with a quarter. Maybe that wasn't a thing yet.
Yeah, maybe not. Yeah.
I hadn't thought of that, but all right.
Hell, I'd be doing that with all my Conapt machines.
No. I want to do it with my mortgage payment. But, yeah.
All right. I don't have anything else on themes. Is there any like running themes in the book that I missed that you guys want to talk about before we get into?
I like that what gets them to Luna and strands them all in Half-Life, or some of them in Half-Life eventually, is greed. It's Rensselaer's greed, basically. I like the cautionary tale aspect of that, you know?
Do you think it's greed or is it desperation? I feel like it's more desperation.
It
Because
could
the
be, yeah.
company is kind of going under and, you
Yeah,
know,
it kind of is.
on the verge of actual death. And
Yeah. But, you know, I think the reason I landed on greed was that he's initially trying to sell that receptionist woman on like 42 or 41,
yeah, right.
you know, inertials.
No,
And I'm like,
there is definitely that element.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
He's like a car salesman trying to sell you on undercoating, you know?
Right.
well, and the whole
Never buy the undercoating.
it's funny because we know from all the research that we've done on Phil's life and what he was doing is that he would have times where he owed so much in parking tickets that he like had his license suspended and he was going through all those things. And so Joe Chip not having the money to get outside is very PKD, and it also gives him a motivation to like, I got to get this like out of date business going. Yeah, I know we got rid of all the psychics on Earth, but like
Joe Chip is a sad sack, but I think he's a way more entertaining sad sack than most of the other ones we've seen in PKD books so far. He's just more interesting.
I agree.
Even though he still has the thing near the end where he says, you know, failure is an option. I might as well give up, as happens with most of these guys. But he just seems more into fixing his problems rather than just accepting them.
Well, and think about this. We've gotten this far into the discussion and we haven't talked about Divorcepedia. We haven't like consulted, you know, like where he was. Larry, do you have the timeline up so we can see
I do.
Where he was in 1966 when he wrote it?
1966, he married Nancy Hackett.
Oh, okay, so he was early. Like he was happy. He was happy, Phil.
Honeymoon time.
Yeah, he was happy, Phil, early in the marriage. Okay, so.
But I mean, Pat does abduct him into a marriage in this story. You know, like
yeah, right.
Which is.
And then she keeps the ring. I like.
Yeah.
It's kind of correct. Isn't it?
Yeah, I agree. It's weird. You know, talking about possible inconsistencies in the story, like the narrative or the dramatic line, they make sense to me. But the only thing in this whole thing that doesn't make sense to me is Pat's powers. Not because of the going back to a branching node and changing that, but because she remembers. You know, it seems like the human mind has got to have some finite storage capacity, such that if she has been doing this every day to like get her hamburger without mayonnaise, like she has got so many parallel universes in her head. I don't see how she gets through the moment, you know?
That's true.
Yeah.
I mean, that's well, maybe she just forgets probably like everybody else, but
yeah.
How do you keep track? How do you keep track of what reality you're actually in?
Yeah. It's like watching Eureka. Did y'all watch Eureka? Eureka has that problem.
Yeah.
You know?
That's a great show. I love that show.
It is. I love Eureka. Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about the reaction that the world had to Ubik, which was obviously this is considered one of his most important works. It was chosen by Lev, I believe it was Lev Grossman.
Grossman?
Yeah, chose it for 100 Lev Grossman chose this for one of the 100 greatest English language novels, which is on the cover of the Mariner edition. It is a big deal, and it is probably one of the reasons. But a lot of times you ask somebody what their favorite...
Well, who is Lev Grossman?
He wrote The Magicians.
Yeah.
If you know The Magicians, that trilogy.
Yeah.
Well, so what is his 100 best list to us?
Is it for Time?
To people.
No, Time Magazine did 100 greatest English language novels, and they whatever reason they chose these novels, and they'd have one person write about why this novel was so great. And
so Time Magazine chose the novels, and he wrote about the novels they chose.
Probably, yeah.
From the stuff of space opera, Dick spins a deeply unsettling existential horror story, a nightmare you'll never be sure you've woken up from. Bum, bum, bum. That's it. That's the quote.
Yep. And that's, I think, but I think the thing about Ubik is that if you ask most like weird fiction fans what their favorite PKD book is, majority of the time it's Ubik.
A majority of the time?
A lot of the time it's Ubik, yeah.
I often give Ubik as my favorite, yeah. I think one reason Ubik has such long legs is that it's a book people will sit around and get stoned and argue about, no, it means this, it means that. I think books that have that kind of discussion starter aspect tend to last and last and last.
Yeah, books that are open to interpretation like this.
Yeah. And I think it's one that, especially since I spent time going through and highlighting and looking for quotes and all that, like the more I looked at it, the more impressed I was with it. I thought it was a 5-star book when I finished reading it, but like the more I went through it, I just, I just found such appreciation for it. Okay, so
well, I want to bring in one more comparison, and that's to Alas All Thinking. I really feel like the shriveled bodies of the dead people, he almost pulled that image directly from Alas All Thinking.
And like for anyone that doesn't know what Larry's talking about is, and we did a special episode a couple of years ago on there's a short story called Alas All Thinking by Harry Bates, who wrote the story that became The Day the Earth Stood Still, and he was an editor mostly, but he wrote science fiction in the 30s, and he wrote a science fiction story in the 30s called Alas All Thinking, which PKD once referred to as the perfect science fiction story from his childhood. And so the
reason he started writing at all
was this story. And so we did a whole episode based on the short story, and it's really crazy for a story written in the 30s. But good callback, Larry, because I hadn't thought about that, but you're right. This does is very influenced by that story. Good. Wow, good job.
The visual also feels like it's from The Ring or Ringu, either one, I guess. Right. The dead kids in the closet,
Right. Yeah, and I think the level to which Ubik has influenced other work is definitely, I couldn't even begin to map that. I wouldn't even know where.
Right.
But well, obviously I'm going to give this 5 out of 5 cold pack canisters. This is, I think, a masterpiece. I think it's one of Dick's best books. Like, I don't see how anyone could argue with that. It's definitely, probably his second best book of the 60s, and I would put it right behind Three Stigmata of Palmer Eldridge, which is still my favorite, at this point, my favorite PKD book. Anthony?
I'll give it 4 out of 5 back talking apartment doors. I think, and I only knocked it down a star because I think he's done this type of story. I think he did it better in Eye in the Sky with kind of the converging alternate realities. But this was a first read for me, and I thought it was an amazing experience. I think the opening the chapters with all the different Ubik commercials really helps make Ubik its own character within the story, rather than just being a thing they talk about. So 4 out of 5 for me.
And you think it's you think Eye in the Sky did this better? Okay, that's interesting.
Well, I think it did certain aspects of kind of the being in a different reality
Because
a
there's
little
more
bit better.
realities in it. I can see it being
Mhm.
more
Yeah,
dynamic.
He
in that
he
sense.
spends more time focusing on a lot of the characters who are experiencing that weird stasis when the death ray collapses.
Yeah.
And in this, he's mostly focused on like Joe Chip and what's going on with Runsiter.
I think Eye in the Sky still suffers from the editorial fuckery. Larry, what's your final judgment?
I think I'd have to give it. I think 4.5. Yeah, 4.5. What do we got left? Quarters with Runsiter's face on it.
4.5 quarters with Runster's face on it. Okay.
Yeah. So, but it's not perfect, but it's really damn close to being perfect for a PKD book. I mean, there's not a lot of flaws you can point out here that drag it down. Other than maybe some of the characters weren't utilized enough. Maybe our villains weren't explored enough. weren't clear enough characters. But other than that, the story stands. It's interesting. It never felt like it dragged for me, not once. And I thought it was a great story.
All right, Steven, final judgment.
I give it all the stars I've got, however many that is. To me, it's up in the PKD pantheon, or my personal pantheon anyways, in my personal cosmos. That being Maze of Death, Galactic Pot Healer, Valis, and Clans of the Alphane Moon. Those are probably my favorites of PKD.
Nice.
And this is right up there, right alongside them. I don't know if it's, I think I might have told you last time, David, that Ubik is my favorite PKD, and I do still like it a lot, but I love those other ones too. And I'll never stop reading Valis either. I think there might come a day where I stop reading Ubik, but I don't think I'll ever stop reading Valis.
Mm-hmm. All right, so all the stars you can give it. Awesome. Yeah, I'd probably give it more stars if I could too. But excuse me, I'd give it more cold pack storage unit. So potential movie treatment. So the film rights to this have bounced around a lot. In 1974, he sold an option to a French filmmaker, Jean-Pierre, and it's Gorin, Gorin. And he actually hired Dick to write the screenplay. And now, some of you might be wondering why we're not covering the Ubik screenplay. I thought about it. I looked into it. But because it was published on its own, we're going to do an episode on the Ubik screenplay on its own because it's a self... Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Anthony and I talked about it. It's a self-contained published book as the screenplay, so I want to cover it separately.
Is that as Dick wrote it, or is it, because I understand there's a lot of notes or a lot of like additions in there too, right? Like interpolations. I've never read it. I don't know.
I don't know.
I haven't looked at it yet.
Yeah.
Right.
I was this close to reading it, and then for this episode, and then decided to keep it separate. So in a July 2006 interview, Tommy Pilato, who was one of the producers of Scanner Darkly, said that they had the option for Ubik, and that he wanted to make a live action feature of it. And that's key that he was saying that because at the time they had just done the animated or partially animated Scanner Darkly. And I know when Issa, PKD's daughter, who runs Electric Sheep Productions, she said before she has 4 priorities. At the time, at one point she said she had 4 priorities: Man in the High Castle, done now, 3 Stigmata, Ubik, and I can't remember what the other one was. I'm brain farting it, but Ubik was one of her priorities, was to one day get a movie of Ubik. Michael Gondry came really close to doing one.
Michel Gondry.
Came really close to doing an adaptation in early 2011.
That would be amazing.
Yeah. In 2014, he did have a quote.
So at the moment, I don't feel up to doing it. That's French, right? It doesn't have the dramatic structure that would make it a good film. I received a script that disheartened me a bit, and that was it. It was a dream, but in life, you can't always have what you want. It seems like he's kind of over it.
Looks like he's over it. Yeah. And that was as close as we got because they did hire somebody to write the script, and they were, and that was the same producing team that did Scanner Darkly. They hired Michel Gondry to do that. And Electric Sheep Productions was involved, and then that's it for now. Would we do it as a movie? Like, do we have any thoughts on that? And who would you hire to direct it if Hollywood gave you all the money and said, make a Ubik movie? Larry.
So I thought the first thing I would start in Joe's Connaught, in his apartment, because I think that's a hilarious scene. I think the other stuff is important and has to be there. That happens prior to that, but it can be put in after that scene. That's our opening scene, is him meeting Pat and that whole thing with the door, his life. We get a lot of character, we get a lot of world building there, and then he finds out about the missing people, and we have to integrate that more into the story. But other than that, I think maybe a Wizard of Oz style color shift or something like that to represent we're in a new world would be nice. Something visual to represent we're in a new world. And I like the idea of Michel Gondry directing. He has such a great visual style to begin with, and I wouldn't mess with his mathematical mind and he would do brilliant things.
Maybe if he got the right script.
Maybe.
So Anthony, how would you do the movie, and who would you have do it?
Oh man, I almost wonder, like we did for Three Stigmata, if this would benefit from being actually a TV series where we can spend a little more time building up the characters that are in Cold Pack with Jory and Ella. We can meet the rest of the team that's going through all this stuff with Joe Chip and kind of move forward and maybe explore these different worlds as we go along. But I actually thought long and hard about this, and you guys might disagree, but I wouldn't mind it if Taika Waititi directed it, because I think that he'd really nail a lot of the humor that I think gets lost in Dick translations. And again, I'm going to say this again for like the 500th time. What we know as Dick adaptations really just turn out to be more inspired by Blade Runner than his actual books.
Yeah.
And you'd want this one, and I agree, it would have to be inspired actually by the books and the tone and the humor and the make it funny.
Yeah.
If you do a limited series, you could basically make the Pkd novel we never got with with doing the Psy anti-talent storyline and really like build that out. But
I like the idea of focusing in each episode on a different member of the team and sort of a through line of are they dead or are they alive, and sort of just hinting at what's going on there. That would be something really cool to see.
Yeah, and Taika Waititi, I could see,
Yeah, he's not all about laughs. I mean, Jojo Rabbit is funny, but it's also fucking dark as shit.
Yeah. Yeah, and he's, I know he's, I'm not going to disagree with you too much, Anthony. I think doing like a limited series, like a 6-episoder, where you could build out that first story would be cool. But I'd
push it to 8 or 10 episodes at the most.
Yeah, I would keep it a movie myself because I think you got a structure for it. But it could be a long one. But since I'll go somebody different, I don't have to. I could agree with you guys, but I'm going to say
Don't you say Christopher Nolan?
No, Jean-Pierre Jeunet.
Okay.
Yeah, Jean-Pierre Jeunet. Yep. My wife is excited by that idea. But I think he would bring the weirdness and the just insanity to the once you got into the Half-Life world. And I agree with Larry to do it, like differentiate it, make it seem very realistic until you get into the Half-Life, and then make it progressively weirder as time regresses. That's how I would do it. Steven, you have any thoughts on movie or who?
You know what? My initial thought was actually Christopher Nolan because of what he did with Tenet. But I agree with Anthony.
I still
that
haven't seen
humor.
it.
Oh, okay, I agree that humor is like a huge important aspect of this, and that's not really Nolan's forte at all. You know, he's more cerebral than comedic.
Although, you know, with Memento, there's a lot of humor in that one.
Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah. Well, I guess that was before everybody was watching, you know.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. You know, I think if I could like dream, if I could assign this to anybody I wanted, it would probably be the Monty Python members from the 70s, you know, because I think they would do wonderful if the film tears and then a big giant animated hand comes in and sprays that film and it comes back together. You know, that would be so fun. I would trade all the slapstick stuff. I would trade all the things that Monty Python brings just to have those moments, those transitions, you know?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Now, who would direct it though? Would it be Gilliam or Jones?
Probably Gilliam. Yeah, probably Gilliam, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Gilliam circled this one. He also circled the world Jones made too.
Well, he is on the on that ad in the in that Pkd documentary.
Oh, with the spray can of Pkd. Yeah. So he's right there. He's ready to do it. So, all right. The next segment is Dicklike Suggestions. Langhorne, you want to give us your video game this time?
Well, yeah. So first of all, I have to mention Ubik, the game, even though I've never played it, and I've heard varying things about it. I hear it's kind of a good game, but it doesn't really give you much of the Ubik experience. Mm-hmm. And so it's not really a Dicklike suggestion because it's too on the nose. So there's that. And then the game I actually want to talk about is called The Fall. And it was made in 2014 by Over the Moon Studios. It's a very small studio. I played it recently with the developer commentary on, and those guys were pretty great. They talked about why each scene existed. So basically what it is you fall into this world where there's trash everywhere. The place is a mess. You think you're a person inside of a suit of armor there to rescue people. But it turns out the human inside is dying. So the suit is actually in control of what's going on. It's a puzzle platformer. You solve the problem. You have this computer robot android enemy who tries to kill you all the time. He's not very cool. Through the course of the game, you gain sentience by finding ways around your programming. It's got that element of, you know, fear of androids taking over that Pkd loves. It's got the what is humanity element. It's very dark and also funny, and it mocks sort of 1950s morality and the, you know, the Eisenhower era happy family stuff. And it's a great game. It's a very small studio, so you're not going to get like AAA graphics or anything, but it's worth playing, and it's super cheap on Steam. So,
okay, Steven, do you have a Dicklike suggestion for us this month?
Nothing new. How about something old?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I've got it.
Yeah, how about, y'all probably know it already. Feed. Y'all know Feed?
No.
M.T. Anderson? Like Ubik reminds, like I feel like Feed is built on the backbone of Ubik, and so in its format, anyways. The chapters are all cut up with these advertising assaults, and it's really effective. It's a really fun novel. The first line, I'll read you the first line here. We went to the moon to have fun, but the moon turned out to completely suck. And just
That's awesome.
yeah. It's a really good novel. It's YA, and I don't know what makes it YA. Really, I guess it has teen protagonists, but I guess YA always kind of addresses the issues that are the focus of the target demographic. But I don't know. I think it probably doesn't get read a lot because it's on a YA shelf, but I think it should be on every shelf. Man, it's really good.
Well, that's the thing about YA is that if you actually get into YA, a lot of those books are really touch on important issues and really dark themes. It's not all about teenage unrequited love and all that stuff.
Yeah, for sure. It's not all John Green,
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
All right, Anthony.
Staying on brand. Nothing.
All right, so I'll make up for Anthony because I have a book and a movie.
Of course you do.
Of course I do. I'm going to go old school with book 2 with an 80s science fiction novel called Mockingbird by Walter Tevis. Walter Tevis is back in the zeitgeist because he wrote a little novel called Queen's Gambit that is very popular.
That's where I've seen that name before.
Yes, he also saw his name because he also wrote The Hustler and The Color of Money as well, and The Man Who Fell to Earth. And so Mockingbird, this was my first time reading it. It's kind of, it's sort of Brave New World-ish. Androids have taken over all responsibility, so humans can just have casual sex and just be weirdos for a little while. So at that point, Mockingbird is kind of an end of the world thing. It's really good. It's great science fiction. And I enjoyed it quite a bit. I definitely enjoy Walter Tevis's writing style. I think I want to go back and read The Hustler and maybe even Queen's Gambit, but I kind of feel like I got enough of that watching the show. But I also checked out some interviews with Walter Tevis, and he did a lot of science fiction short stories in the same era that Pkd was massively putting out a lot. And so I'm going to try and track down a collection of his short science fiction because I think that would be really good to have. And so the other Dicklike Suggestions, it's a brand new film from San Diego pair of filmmakers, Moorhead and Benson, who made Spring and The Endless. They have a new movie called Synchronic with Anthony Mackie. And much like Endless, Synchronic, time is a monster, just in the same way. And so it's very Pkd because the plot of the movie is that there's this drug on the street called Synchronic, and it's a time travel drug. It's very dark, but there's also, Anthony Mackie has a line similar to Steven's Dicklike Suggestion where he just says the past sucks really loud. Like he just yells the past sucks. So it's a really good movie, and I actually think it's Benson and Moorhead's best film. All right, so that's our last segment.
We usually do the next book now.
Oh, yeah, you're right. I don't even know what the next book is. Larry?
Galactic Pot Healer. You have that one, Anthony?
Do I can bring it up.
I love Galactic Pot Healer, man.
That's what I've never read that one. I think I read part of it, but I never got to read the whole thing.
Sometimes even gods need help. In Galactic Pot Healer, that god is an alien creature known as the Glimmung, which looks alternately like a flaming wheel. A teenage girl in a swirling mass of ocean life. In order to raise a sunken city, he summons beings from across the galaxy to Plowman's planet. Joe Fernwright is one of those summoned, needed for his skills at pot healing, repairing broken ceramics, but from the moment Joe arrives on Plowman's planet, things start to go awry. Galactic Pot Healer.
Yeah, I definitely remember reading at least some of this book.
All right, so we'll see everybody. Our next episode will be Galactic Pot Healer. I think we'll have other things coming out in between, but thank you. Yeah, if you made it this far, you made it further than Steven's Koosh ball did.
Well, real quick though, Steven, where can people find you?
Yeah,
Twitter works. I'm on Twitter. That's a good place to find me.
and you have a book coming out later this.
I do. My Heart is a Chainsaw. It's out in like 8 months. It's August 31st. Yeah.
So people can look.
And The Only Canadians just came out in paperback. It's got that pretty yellow side on it now.
Nice.
Ooh. I'll definitely be sending people your way to your books. Dickheads, just going to close out with our usual reminder to keep it paranoid. Stay paranoid.
Yeah. Good night or goodbye or whatever.